What's up, hobby friends? My name is Casey and welcome back to another miniature rescue. This week, we're going to be taking on a really cool old pair of models, Gotrek and Felix. Last month, a subscriber named Mike sent me a boatload of models. I showed them off a little bit in a few videos ago, and I've been actually really excited to get to a lot of these models. Some of the standouts in the models that he had sent. These are second edition models, and in particular, the Gotrek with the troll head is a Games Day model from like 2000 or something. So these models are 25 plus years old. These are old metal models. There's some jank, but they're also really, really cool. The state that these models in isn't the worst. There's a little bit of paint on each of them that needs to come off, but overall, the metal's looking pretty good other than the really dated actual sculpting, which you'll see later on kind of makes the paint job unique. That being said, I still think there's a ton of character in these models. They really bring back the old nostalgia that I have for the books that these characters were featured in. All the jank aside, these models feel pretty cool. They're really cool together. There's tons of books about them as characters together. The biggest reason that I wanted to work on these models in particular was that they made me remember that a long time ago, when I was maybe in middle school, I had picked up a Felix and Gotrek novel because it said Warhammer on it. I was in the library at, I think, my middle school library, and they just happened to have this book, which makes me think that somebody who worked there was a Warhammer fan and wanted it in the library at school. The book in particular was Skaven Slayer, and that was kind of my first introduction to, I guess, the old world Warhammer fantasy and what Skaven were and who these characters were. And from that, I've kind of just grown an appreciation of those older models and the stories and things like that. Funny enough, I haven't actually read any other Felix and Gotrek novels. They're supposed to be kind of on the better end of novels for Warhammer, so it's probably something I should get to. That being said, I do have the Skaven Slayer audiobook, and I'm planning on giving it a listen as I paint these models, which is kind of fun. So obviously the paint needs to come off of these models, so I can get them soaking in a jar of acetone to really start to get that process going. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these into a smaller jar of IPA and get that into a sonic cleaner in a water bath. That way we can just remove all the paint and I can start to brush up and clean up the metal. Otherwise, the issue that we have is that Felix is actually missing his sword. These models are in metal, and the Gotrek is a single cast, so there aren't any other pieces missing for him. But Felix came in two separate parts. It was the main body and then the sword, and you just glued them together. So the problem, I guess, is that I need to find a sword that looks enough like his actual sword to make this make sense. I can go through a bunch of bits in my bits box and pull out a bunch of different swords that might work, and I can also look online to see if there's anything that I can 3D print that's going to make sense. Luckily, I did find a pretty nice file that has Felix's actual sword with the runes on it and everything. The one that's actually supposed to go with this model. And my thinking is that I can just cut away the hilt of the sword and then use the top half, the crossguard and above, to actually just finish this. So I'm going to get those files prepped, and I'm going to basically print them out in a bunch of different sizes to see if that's going to actually work. If not, I have a ton of different swords out of my bits box that I can use. Maybe we can cut them up, we can do something with to make it make sense. A while back, Flexispot sent me their Japanese Joinery Bed, full size with a headboard, mattress, and riser, all in a very elegant oak finish. Now, I've had pretty bad beds in the past. Bad construction, weird pieces sticking out that you slam your shin into, and I've had to try and fix those problems myself, and it sucks. Now that I've had some time with the Flexispot bed, I wanted to share some thoughts. The first thing that jumps out to me is how nice and heavy the wood is. It's rubber wood, which is an actual hardwood, and the bed is extremely sturdy once it's put together. Which brings up the next thing. I mean, I get that it's a special kind of jointed bed, but it's really cool. The Japanese joinery goes together really easily, and the joints feel strong when all the pieces are puzzled together. Another super useful thing for me has been the lifting motor at the top half of the bed, which is probably the coolest thing that you can actually have on a bed. The head of the bed lifts up, and it's super comfortable to lie in and even get important reading done. Of course, you can paint minis too, but then again, Flexispot makes tables and chairs for that. So you might just want to relax in it and sleep. There's also 10.2 inches of room under the bed, so I can fit all sorts of hobby stuff. At this point, I don't even have to get out of bed to get any of it. It's like this bed was basically made for me. In all seriousness, the bed is solid. It's made of real hardwood, not the cheap stuff that won't last, but it's actually very cost effective for what you get as well. On top of that, these beds are ready to ship, so there's no waiting for them to be made. They're boxed up and ready to go within a couple of days, with delivery to your bedroom in 3 to 5 days. If you're looking to upgrade your bedroom, click the link below to experience the Flexispot bed frame for yourself. Don't miss out, use my code for an instant discount. Transform your sleep with comfort, convenience, and unmatched value. Thanks again, Flexispot, for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to those minis. Okay, so I'm printing out a set of swords that will hopefully do the trick for Felix. And while those are running, I can start to get the models cleaned off and ready for paint. The first thing I need to do is scrub as much of the paint away with a toothbrush. A ton of it gets brushed away, but there's still some stubborn paint in the deeper recesses, so I'll need to get out a soft wire brush and a Dremel to really get the metal cleaned up. While I was cleaning the models, I was starting to think about what kind of basing I wanted them to be on. Gotrek is technically holding a troll head, but since I'm going down the path of Skaven Slayer right now, I really wanted to get them onto some sewer bases. I headed to my mini factory and went to one of my favorite base topper stores, Zabavka Workshop. They've been really consistent for me, and I always seem to find what I'm looking for, whether it's a topper or a full base. The swords were finished, so I started running a nice set of sewer bases, the idea being that I can paint up a handful of them and have some extras for later projects. The real nice thing about base toppers, and why I keep coming back to them, is that they're plentiful from places like Zabavka Workshop, and they're pretty quick to print out. I can get a full set of bases done in like an hour. On top of that, no pun intended, they are generally pretty fun to paint. Lots of variety in each base, and a close match in theme means that you can knock them out with a handful of colors really quickly. To prep them, I shaved away any print nubs with an X-Acto and wet sanded the bottom of each topper so it would sit nice and flush with the blank bases. I did some quick dry fitting with some of the models that I plan on using, beyond just the 2 in this video, and put the rest into my storage cabinet for extra bits. I'll probably remember where I put them in 6 months, probably. Now that the bases are ready to go, it's time to finish prepping the models. I start by gently and caringly cutting away the tabs from each model. The tabs will live in a box from now on that has every tab that I've ever cut off of a metal model. They might come in handy. Then I shave down the mold lines and make sure that the models can sit flat on the bases. I also intend to pin the models down using a paper clip through the bases, so they're going to be nice and sturdy for a long time. Before jumping into priming, I need to get the sword attached to Felix. I cleaned and test fit the 3D printed swords, but I ran into a few problems. The file looks pretty nice, but the actual sword is really thin. That means that the blade will 100% break, even if I breathe on it wrong. And if I stretch the sword and make it taller and thicker, it just starts to look a little weird, so I don't think it's gonna work. I ended up using a pretty nice plastic sword from the pile that I made earlier. The blade that I have is actually a pretty close match, and this just ended up being a better solution for now. I might be able to find a proper match in the future, hopefully the actual metal blade, and in that case, I can just snap this one off and put the new one on. It's kind of nice in one respect. I get to do some sweet save searches and hunting for a very specific part, and that generally just makes me happy. I've narrowed down the bases to these 4. And I'm gonna paint each one of them just in case I like one over the other. I start with a dry brush of dark gray and work my way up to a mid-tone gray and a final dry brush of light gray over the top. The metallics are taken care of with copper, and I weather down the stone and metal with some dark green moss color and a thinned down verdigris. For any of the liquid pools on the bases, I grabbed some army paint or technical paint, some kind of green ooze, and I loaded up the pools. The effect works really well as it's more glossy when the paint dries, but still transparent enough that you can actually see the dry brushed ripples of, goo underneath. I finished these off with some dead grass tufts, and I'm really liking the way that they look. Perfect for the Skaven and the sewer vibes that I was hoping for. Now that those are done, we can prime up the models. I do a quick spider check and get out the black. First, I take care of the base rims with the airbrush and then move on to the models. A couple of thin coats of black primer followed by a pretty even spray of white across the models to help with some brighter colors, and finish them off with a top-down spray of white to full opacity. It's basically a zenithal highlight, but I've been having a much better time of using the white to do a kind of a gray layer, leaving the absolute deepest shadows closer to black, then shooting the white from the top so that you can really start to pick up those details. As you can see, the models are looking pretty good, including the 3D printed versions of each of them, which I'm going to keep around for reference, we'll say. Links totally won't be at the bottom of the description or anything for these sweet files. Alright, time to load up the wet palette with some color and get started on these minis. The first color to go down will be orange for Gotrek's hair, a few thin coats, and we should get some nice coverage. And the white undercoat here is doing a ton of work for colors like this, and keeps them really bright. Since these models are older and they're more characterful, it makes sense to go brighter with them. I like that for these, so I'm gonna have some fun with it. The skin is going to get a coat of darker pink tone, something that we can work up from that will be closer to the shading color that I'm going to be deploying later on. I'm also going to start the troll head with this color. I want this guy to have a bunch of fun colors that can mix together and just really stand out. So some pink in the recesses and the soft bits that I can mix in with some purple as a base skin tone. I like to wet blend these colors right on the model, which really gives the skin a nice base coat, and then bring in something that stands off the purple to highlight. So I bring in some dark jade and start to hit all of the raised details. Right now I'm being pretty loose with it, but as I layer up each color, I'm going to try and hit less area with each subsequent color. And the more paint that goes down, the better I feel about how he starts to look. I'm going to end up coming back to the head once these colors dry a little more, but there's no time to waste, so I bring in some dark red brown to start all the leather. And since this still has more red than brown in it, I'm going to sneak some of this into the gooey bits on the back of that troll head. It's going to blend with the purple nicely, and it starts to make that part of the model look a little more like you would think it should. The front of the head is pretty dry now, so I'm going to start the layering process by bringing back some of that pink that I started with. I like it for the softer parts of the head, like inside the ears and the lips. Then I start with some brighter jade on the head. It starts to define the shapes and really brighten it up. I add a little bit of off-white to that and just continue the layering process. The result is a pretty fun troll head, even if he's not doing his best right now. For the metallics, I take care of the base coats with pretty dark metal. That way it fills in nicely, and I can use a bright silver to just pick out the biggest pieces later. It makes it easy to take care of, and I don't need to go with a black wash to give it more contrast. Coming back to the skin, I'm going to use a very thinned down scale 75 paint called Indian Shadow. I've really grown attached to this color for shading skin. It thins down really well, and I can use it initially as a kind of wash, and then later on as a glaze to blend the colors together. It's slightly darker than our base coat, but it looks pretty natural being used this way. Once it's dry, I'm going to use the original skin color to define those shapes. Then continue to do that with progressively lighter pinks until I just like the way that it looks. To keep the brighter colors going, I'm going to give my Gotrek a mix of red and blue pants. I did that on my other Gotrek, and I'm going to keep that painting canon going. It's a good mix of color, and it definitely stands out. The orange hair gets a small dry brush of bright orange, just to pick out the details on the hair. I started by using a brush and I kind of got impatient, so dry brushing it is. And honestly, on older models like this, that usually works really well. Felix, on the other hand, hasn't really been getting a lot of attention. I got a little excited with the troll head, so let's switch things up and get this base coated. I used the same colors across both models, so they at least feel like they belong together. A dark red brown to start the cloak, and a wet blend of bright red to bring out those details. The same blue for the pants, and I decided I wanted to make Felix look more like the classic pictures that I've seen of him. Blue pants, white stripes. And it's a look, if I do say so. But, you know, it somehow works for him. Bright gray to map out the lines, thicken them up, and then I bring back the blue to really define those lines. Yeah, those are definitely some pants. A final pass of bright red on the cloak to get all the major details, and he's getting pretty close to being done. Some orange brown for the leather, some yellow hair, a little gold for the belt, and we can get these guys moved onto their final bases. Models like this are always super fun to take on. The older sculpts are super weird most of the time, but at the same time, they're really fun to paint. In some ways, you don't have to take them as seriously as you would a modern plastic kit. They are fun visual representations of characters from a book series, and you can just have a good time putting bright colors on them and bringing them to life. Personally, I'm going to be using these in my dwarf army because why not? Playing something like Spearhead and adding additions like this to make my army just a little bit different and more more fun is one of the best uses for older models like this. Nobody else is going to be rolling around playing a Fire Slayer's army in Spearhead with a Gotrek and Felix. Not necessarily, and certainly not in the same way. So if I'm going to take my army somewhere, these are going to be some standout models. And I like that. They're not going to waste and sitting in a drawer. A huge thanks to Mike for sending these models in. Your generosity is genuinely appreciated. I just hope that I can get to the rest of the stuff in a timely manner because there's some really cool models in there that I want to share with everyone. Until then, thank you for joining me on another miniature rescue. If you like something about this video, please consider hitting that like button, sharing this video with your hobby friends, and subscribing for more miniature rescues. Once again, I'm Casey, and I will see you in the next video. And of course, here are Gotrek and Felix. Thanks again for watching.